lesson to your listeners, if this is of value to them, is we tried to work with an investment banking firm that really didn't have the background, and it became...
Welcome to a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, presented by Cornerstone International Alliance. I am your host, Nick Olsen. On this show, I get the opportunity to talk with the brightest minds in lower middle market M&A. Together, we discuss industry intelligence, deal management, shared successes, specialized expertise, and much more. If you serve the small to medium-sized business owner, this show will offer you tactics and insights you can use and implement now to become a master in M&A. All right, go ahead, Mary.
I cannot divulge, because of my non-disclosed, the total dollar amount, but what I can say is our top line revenues were large enough for Sharon to take me on as a client.
Gotcha.
Let me put a little context around that. Mary had this personal disaster and turned it into both a personal and professional success. And that is an unbelievable thing to have achieved. She built a company, I think, as you put in the beginning, Nick, with over 1,300 people. And many of these people were people who had not had jobs for a long time. I'm not sure I'm giving away too much by saying, Mary, you kind of came at this with a social work mentality. You were the classic wanting to do well by doing good. And so that doing good was extremely important, and it motivated the value system of the entity that created a platform that you were able to grow it over time. And people stayed there in part because, let's be honest, you were hiring people who didn't have a lot of other job opportunities, but who were feeling validated and respected and earning money. And that was terrific. And I think that the quality of services that they were able to provide to the ultimate customers were in fact higher, in part because of that mission-driven element of it. So there's lots of things that came together. Part of it was your family background and that resiliency, and looking at SS soldiers and saying, I'm not dying here, and saying to you as you were fired, well, I'm not giving up now. So it's that process of continuing to move forward and building something that helps society, but is also really good for you as well. And God bless you for doing so.
Sharon, thank you.
What got you to the point, Mary, where you're like, okay, now I think it might be time to exit the company, sell the company. What kind of drove that?
So right from the beginning, I had think of the end game first. So I always knew I wanted to sell this company. And it's like, if you buy a house that you know one day you're going to sell, when you're looking at the kitchen that you want to put into your house, you're going to look at a kitchen that will only up the resale of your company. So every facet of what I did had the ultimate goal of one day selling. So it wasn't one day I woke up and thought I would sell it, because I knew right from the beginning I wanted to have an exit. So that helped me become very strategic about every facet of what I did.
Sharon, how did that make your life as the investment banker selling the company, I would imagine, a little bit easier?
Well, let's not tell this to Mary, but it really made my life a lot easier. The truth is, very often business owners will come and say, I want to sell now. And we look at them and say, understand you've built a great company, but here's what needs to be done for that to occur. Mary had really been thinking about this for years before actually being in contact with us. And when we looked at the company, we saw a lot of things. We saw that there were policies and procedures in place so that if, God forbid, Mary were to go out in the parking lot and get struck by lightning, the company would continue. There were other people in management who were responsible for things. Revenue was growing. And from a GovCon perspective, she had just landed a very large contract that was going to go on for years. So in many ways, all of the lightning strikes were happening at the same time. And Mary was smart enough to say, this is my time. And upon looking at the company, we looked at her and said, this is your time. Let's get started.
Mary, how did you find Sharon and her team at sbLiftOff?
Okay. So Sharon, you already know this, and Nick, the lesson to your listeners, if this is of value to them, is GovCon is a completely different animal. It is. And we tried to work with an M&A, an investment banking firm that really didn't have the background. And it became really apparent that by not having the right investment banker, we could be leaving all kinds of money on the table. So I was planning to fire the investment banker we had, but he fired me first, which is actually a relief because I didn't want to have to do it, but he had no problem firing me. But it was going to happen anyway. And it's all who you know. And, luck plays a chance in this, but I happened to be having dinner with a woman. I'm in Columbus, Ohio. And this, I don't know if you knew it, but her identical twin lives here. So I happened to have dinner with these two women. One of them was a CFO in DC. And she said, I need to introduce you to Sharon. And I hadn't even gotten the word out of my mouth when our chief financial officer, even before he met you, he said, my gut tells me yes. Yes, because he knew me well enough to know that I could relate, number one, to a woman. And I know this is probably not political, right? I shouldn't mention this. But Nick, this could be another show, is you look at the number of business owners that are women who have a business big enough to sell. And there aren't a lot of women investment bankers. And the banker we had, I swear to you, he was from the South. He might get a contract out on me if he's listening to this. But there were so many times I felt like he was so close to saying, oh, honey, could you go to the kitchen and get me a cup of coffee? Because he wasn't used to dealing with women who had businesses to sell.
Yeah.
It's interesting because women do this, but men do as well. But sometimes people who have not gone through an M&A process, but have built a business, want to dive in deep as to what is the process, how is it working, what are we going to do, etc. And I find that there's some M&A advisors that get annoyed by that, basically saying, you hired me, let me do my job. I view it as, we're going to do this together. I didn't build your company. I couldn't build your company. I know how to sell it. And together as a partnership, we can be incredibly effective. Mm-hmm. I think that could be true for men, for women, but that was what I think Merry needed. She needed somebody who was going to say, we're partners in this. Let's work together to get over the right line.
These are big companies that were not used to the level of hand-holding that I needed. And by the way, Sharon's background in GovCon, in the wrong hands, we would not have been nearly as successful because of Sharon's, not only her intel and understanding of GovCon, but there were so many things we thought were insurmountable that side by side, we worked with lawyers who specialized in our very issues, and they found workarounds that were simply unbelievably helpful.
Yeah, basically, Sharon, it's an area where knowing the rules really matters. So there's wonderful M&A advisors out there, but if you've got subject matter expertise in the sector that you're looking at, my gosh, yes, that could really make a difference.
Yes.
And I've heard that time and time again, as Sharon, you're a part of Cornerstone International Alliance, and anything government contracted related, you're always the first call because you have that reputation, that the experience, the in like you said, the rules, you're going to be able to play the game, better. And I think within our group, we have really quality firms in our group, but they know what they know and they know what they don't know. And they're more than happy to, and the egos aren't there. They're like, hey, Sharon, I got questions, or you want to work on this? I know you're working on a couple of deals with members right now. And, it's that collaborative, initiative together that you're going to serve the client. And it's all about the client, right?
It's
regardless if you're doing it alone or you're collaborating with someone else together, you want to make sure that that's the best possible outcome and process and experience for the client. Because Merry, that was the first time you sold a business, correct?
Yes.
How did never have going through that prior and having someone like Sharon on your side, how did that help you go through some, probably a little bit of, I've never done this before. I don't know what to expect. I don't know what's going to happen. How did having someone like Sharon on your side, impact that?
Well, between our chief financial officer, it really helps to have a chief financial officer that's seen this rodeo 3 or 4 times. So between him, Sharon, and her incredible team of incredibly bright, hands-on, it was just so easy. And I just found myself grateful at the time, and especially on the other side of it, just so grateful that the story ended so well.
Our premise is that most of the business owners we work with are smart people. They took an idea and they turned it into a company, and that's fantastic. But they may not have a lot of experience with M&A. That doesn't mean that they're not knowledgeable or experienced. It's just an area that they don't do. And that's why the partnership is so important. And if you come in with I am the expert on all, first of all, I think it's a real turnoff to the business owner. And second is, I don't think it's as good a process. Let's be respectful of each other. Let's be respectful of our clients, respectful of the buyers, understanding what the market is like. And these things are never totally smooth, but you can predict more. And our ability to say to Mary, by the way, here's the process, here's where things are going to happen, and you're going to feel not so great at this particular point. When we get to a networking capital discussion, you're going to say, why do I need to leave money behind at all? But let's talk about that in advance so it's not hitting you in the moment as a particularly challenging concern.
Nick, I needed a hands-on partner that I had a trusted relationship, the kind of person who would be my friend if we weren't working together, who saw the worst sides of me, coached me, gave me honest feedback. I mean, there was a point that I kept saying no, 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 no to almost everyone she brought me. And then she felt comfortable enough having a crucial conversation saying, you can't keep saying no. You have to have an open mind here. But it was just so great. And I hope that everyone listening understands that if you don't have that kind of trust or someone at your side as your partner, keep going till you find somebody that will give you that level of attention and care and love, because you are getting rid of your baby.
Mm-hmm. Mary, think about this. What if you would have chosen the path of trying to sell that business yourself?
Heaven forbid. Heaven forbid. I would not have given that a moment's thought. And not with the level of expertise I didn't have, which is how you sell GovCon. It's a different animal, right, Sharon?
It's a completely different animal. Truth is, selling a company is hard. Building a company is hard, but selling a company is hard as well. When I have a toothache, I don't say, I'm going to tie a string around my tooth and just close the door and pull the tooth. I go to a dentist. And this is kind of a similar type of thing. It is true, and Nick, you're making an excellent point. A lot of business owners say, I could do this myself, in part because there's such an individualistic element to business owners. They started their company, and with rare exception, they have no idea what they're doing. And it takes a couple of years, and they pivot, and they grow, and they change, and they ultimately get to a place that's really terrific. But unfortunately, M&A is one and done. There's no possibility of, I'm going to learn on this one and the next time I'll do better. No, not for something that's probably the biggest financial transaction of your life, and that there probably isn't a second one coming after it.
Yeah, it's the one and only time typically you get to do it. So you want to make sure you're doing it correctly and getting the best opportunity and deal for you. Mary, you had mentioned you said no to a lot of the potential buyers. What was your mindset as to who could be the right fit to buy your company? And then what made you choose the ultimate, buyer?
I ultimately chose the ultimate buyer because Sharon, I think you're Jordan on the call with you. And they were like, we brought you 4 or 5 people and you've said no, 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 no. And you just have to keep an open mind. And you asked a really good question because, Nick, I envisioned somebody who would make this a global company, someone who had aspirations to being a global for-profit social enterprise that globally took this concept and worked with different governments of different countries to work with government to hire the most disenfranchised people with barriers to work. So I had this fantasy vision. And then when Sharon had her crucial conversation with me of, Mary, we've brought you 4 or 5 people and you've said, no, no, no. I don't know how we're going to sell this company if you don't open your mind. So it was when I opened my mind, things happened.
Mary had a lot of, obviously she was a business owner who wants to sell her company for the maximum possible amount. Completely agree. She also, like a lot of other business owners, cared a lot about the people who worked there, the culture that had been created. Yeah. And sometimes there's a conflict with that. If you want to sell to a company that wants to be global, that's great, but your culture is going to go away and you're going to get merged into this bigger entity. If you want to maintain that culture, you need to sell to somebody who's going to be taking on your company and will work with it from there. These are just choices that need to be made. And so I think part of our role is being realistic about what those choices are and saying, there are trade-offs in everything. That's why it's called a negotiation. And which are the things that are most important to you as the business owner? But it's not somebody that you're going to marry. It's somebody who's going to take over your child. And you want to make sure that you're leaving it in good hands.
This episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast is powered by Cornerstone International Alliance, where leading M&A firms come together. As part of this international network, you get access to global opportunities, over 200 M&A experts, enhanced collaboration and knowledge sharing, and some of the best M&A tools and resources available, all to help you take your firm to the next level. Ready to join this exclusive network? Visit cornerstoneia.com/new member today. Sharon, I would imagine, that's not an easy conversation for you to have with some, like Mary or any other client who, like, we found you really good buyers, and I would imagine, they were good fits in their own unique ways. But tell us a little bit from your perspective, Sharon, about having that conversation with a client who might be, I want to say this in the correct way, but just having that challenge along the way to kind of overcome that hurdle to help them understand that these are the right fit. Like, how do you have that conversation to keep the deal moving forward?
I think that part of the job of an M&A advisor is to figure out how to build trust with their client. And that's not something that just kind of happens. It develops over time. So I don't know that I could have had a arm's length relationship with Mary and then come in and said, you're not listening to me. I think it had to be me listening for a long time and indicating that I'm hearing and that I care about what those goals are. And then being very honest about saying, maybe you can't have every goal. Maybe you need to make some decisions, and each option is going to have different trade-offs. So let's start dealing with the real world where nothing is perfect. Every company has strengths, but every company has challenges as well. Every buyer has strengths, but they have challenges as well. And you've got to figure out, well, what can you tolerate and what's going to work well? But it really requires the M&A advisor to have a truly trusting relationship and be worthy of that trust.
Which Sharon holds. I don't know about your other clients. I just know about my experience is our CFO and I not just only trusted Sharon, but her incredible team. That because success is a team sport.
A team. It's not just me.
Nick, this is related but not related, but this is something your listeners might want to be aware of. And I don't know if it affects commercial as much as it does GovCon, but our business sold right before an election. And that had a major impact on what our going market rate could be. So I just want to mention there are so many factors in a successful M&A or barriers that could come up. And that was something that maybe if we had to do over again, we could have waited till after the election. I don't know, but that had a bearing on what the market wanted to pay for the company.
I think that's right. I think one of the things that we always say to sellers is that risk to the buyer is a lower price to the seller. That risk is going to get priced in. In GovCon, elections matter. I think it matters generally, but in GovCon particularly. Merry had a company that was doing good, doing well, but also serving a mission. And that mission was very well respected. And I think that we found a buyer who was bought into that mission, who really liked working with these kinds of people who were otherwise having a hard time getting jobs. So, no perfect buyers out there, but you find the best that makes sense. And of course, they have to have the ability to do the transaction.
Well, it sounds like, Sharon, you and your team were able to find multiple offers, multiple buyers in we'll call it unperfect market with an election year. Because, uncertainty is also a big thing. And when there's uncertainty, like, an election or a pandemic or, other political issues, buyers, tend to, maybe do more due diligence or hold off more, or like you said, maybe pay less of a multiple on the opportunity. But it sounds like you were able to get a good deal for Merry in an unperfect environment. Merry, would you say for what you got for the business, did that meet or exceed your expectations going into the sale process?
I think Sharon had estimated that because she's always been upfront with me. And she wanted to know up front that I have to be realistic. But we did better than Sharon thought.
That's true.
Amazing. Sharon, talk to us, because as M&A advisors, you want to set reasonable expectations, but regardless, you're going to try to exceed that benchmark for all of your clients. And talk to a little bit about that and how you view that.
We strongly believe in under-promising and over-delivering. As M&A advisors, the vast predominance of our compensation comes upon the successful closing of a deal. If I look at a company and I think this company is worth 20 million and the owner thinks it's worth 45, that's fantastic, but I'm the wrong person to bring them to market. If I think it's worth 20 and they think it's worth 23, we'll bridge that gap. But we kind of know going in. The last thing that we at sbLiftOff want to do is have an unhappy client. So if we're going to have a vastly different valuation expectation than what the owner is, that's not a good deal for us to be involved in. I hope that they get that. They hope that they get that value. But if we don't think that we can do that, I don't want to overpromise. Now, there's always some negotiations that go on these deals. A buyer doesn't put a paper on the table and the seller says yes. And, people need to discuss things. But we had already prepared Merry for where we thought the market was going to be. And then we did our best to basically put the best wrapping around the company. It was a strong company. It had all sorts of positive attributes. And we spent time trying to elicit what those were, because most people, when they first look at a sim, spend 30 seconds. So we're very much of the view of hit them over the head with why this is a good opportunity and deal with all the details later. But tell them why this matters. And we find that to be a very helpful approach.
And like I said, I don't want to know numbers, obviously, but when you looked at, Merry, I know you looked at either one of you can answer this. You looked at a handful of buyers, 4 or 5, whatever it was, the number was. What was important to you as far as outside of, let's talk about deal structure. What was important to you in a deal? Obviously, every business owner wants as much cash at close as they can get. Sometimes, a lot of times, that doesn't always work to get 100%. So as far as the structure of the deal and how Sharon explained that to you guys, and what was important to you as a business owner to get out of that deal, that structure of the deal?
Believe it or not, well, the top line revenue was incredibly important. But when I interviewed all the prospects Sharon brought, the reputation of the buyer, because there was one buyer that just serendipitously I had heard some nefarious things about. And I didn't want a buyer that would do anything to hurt the employees. And what I'd heard about one of the buyers through a roundabout way is that they hadn't paid employees. So to me, that was
Yeah, that was a deal breaker.
That was a deal breaker. What I heard from the different prospects, one in particular, was they were doing what's it called?
A roll up.
They were, yes, you knew exactly what I was thinking. They were doing a roll up of call centers, and they wanted to add a federal. They wanted to add government in their roll up. And we met with the person who headed up the contact center roll up. And he was so smart and so versed. And he did something because I read books on M&A, 2 or 3, and attended seminars for years before I met Sharon. And I don't know if this was just rhetoric or was true, but the one that impressed me the most is one who said how much they really valued that whatever got the roll-up owners successful, to value that, retain it, and treat it respectfully. And that really impressed me. I don't know if that was true or not, but there was only one that said, we know how much you value your company, and whatever made you so great, we'll retain it. Mm-hmm. But at the end of the day, and I read about this before the sale, is when you sell your business, you lose ownership, you lose say. It was a stage of your life that you loved passionately, but you really can't hold on to it unless you work that in the terms. And those were not the terms that Sharon had for me in our sale.
We want to help people lift off to their next goal in life.
Move on. Move on.
You know, there was a time in your life when you had children. There were a time in your life when you got to be teenagers, and then they went to college or not.
Yeah.
There's a time in your life when you're forming a business, when you're running a business, and then afterwards. And that period can go on with a transition, but it's not as though you are exiting. You're going off to your next goal in life.
Yeah.
And Mary and Sharon, I really appreciate this. This has been great insights into just the interaction between, seller and M&A advisor. And you guys have built an amazing bond relationship, trust over the period that you guys worked. And it looks like you're staying in contact and staying friends afterwards. So that's amazing. Mary, going through the process, what advice, a couple of things you would give other business owners who are in your position, maybe a year or two before selling? What advice would you give them to prepare for the sale, or kind of get them to, trust that this is the right time to sell? Like, we need to take this leap of faith. And what advice would you give other business owners who might be listening to the show?
Don't ever plan for a fire sale, because you'll get pennies on the dollar. But it's never too soon to plan for your exit. Get to know your bankers, because our bankers had to do cartwheels for us. Have a really great chief financial officer. And if you don't have a great one, get one who, at least to consult with you on the transaction, who's been through more than 3 or 4 rodeos. Because our chief financial officer, Sharon, at least in what I could see, I thought the fact that he's been through so many was incredibly valuable. Sharon, I don't know if you'd agree with this, but I think you should really like your investment banker.
Yes.
It's very hard to have trust for somebody that you don't like.
Like them, and you should trust them. And if they're not treating you respectfully, get rid of them. And if they're not patient with you, you have the wrong person. Because this is a very personal, trying issue, and you are locked at the hip together for was it 18 months, Sharon?
It wasn't quite 18 months, but it was a while. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, you talk to them more than you talk to your own spouses. Seriously. I mean, we would talk morning, afternoon, night. It's so much back and forth. And if you like the person, it's great. It's great.
Yeah. How important, Mary, do you think Sharon and her team were to the success of this sale?
Totally, every part of it, without divulging too much detail. GovCon is so specific and has all these rules and regulations that at one point we met with Sharon and she said, look, what you want to do, I really don't think you can do. But she kept an open mind, and we spent hours with our attorney specialized in GovCon, and we discovered a loophole. So there were so many times that it was so much minutia and detail that I'm just so grateful all the time, Sharon. During the process, after the process, it was just a great experience, but I think everyone is entitled to a great experience. This is not cheap. This is not cheap. It's a major investment. It's a worthwhile investment. And you deserve to be treated with respect and someone who is several steps ahead of you and knows what they're doing. And by the way, Sharon didn't tell you this, but she's a lawyer by training.
Mm-hmm.
So that helped.
It does
a lot.
help. I mean, I'm not practicing law at all, but I speak legalese. So that kind of helps when I'm negotiating.
And Nick, we had a lot of white knuckling moments where we weren't sure if the clients were going to let us assign the contracts. And Sharon was at my side, and no matter how big and bold the client was, she met them head on. And there were just so many moments in this arduous journey that it's so much easier doing with people you like and trust.
Absolutely. Sharon will go to battle for you regardless. And that's always been something I've admired and respected of her and her team. Sharon is very knowledgeable and experienced, but she also knows how to get the most out of things from my experience. And it sounds like that she brought that to this opportunity as well.
It was an amazing experience. As good as the one I had.
Yeah.
It was extraordinary.
Yeah. Sharon, one last question for you. Having gone through this with Merry, just any last thoughts on the deal itself and how it played out for you? I mean, like I said, 16, 18 months is a long time to work together, and you guys built a tremendous trust and rapport over that time. But just from your perspective, how did the deal go, the outcomes and all that sort of stuff?
Outcome was terrific. And a lot of that is due to Merry and her team for building a really wonderful company. We can't sell that which doesn't exist. So that's all Merry. We then take it and say, okay, we're going to zigzag in the following ways to get there. I've got to say, being an M&A advisor is absolutely an honor. We get to work with people who've created something out of nothing and who are emotionally tied to that company, and work with them through a very important financial transaction and tell them about what is fair and what's respectful. And we try and be very respectful to the other side as well. So, it is an honor for the sbLiftOff team to work with folks like Merry, because we think it's the backbone of the U.S. economy, and just delighted to be able to do our part in that.
Thank you for sharing that, Sharon. And Merry, really appreciate you joining and willing to take an inside look at your experience in selling your company and working with Sharon and her team. Congratulations on the not so distant future launch of your book.
Thank you.
Tell our listeners when is it going to be available and where can they find it?
It will be on Amazon, and it should be coming out by the end of August, if not sooner. And people can pre-order the book on my site, which is www.firedtoinspired.com.
All right. And we'll make sure to put that link in our show notes. Definitely check out that book, pre-order it. And if you've ever been fired, this is a book for you. You're going to want to read and really really hit on Merry's experience and how she overcame that. So Merry, Sharon, thank you so much for coming on the show. This was one of my favorite episodes. Not every day you get to have a business owner and an M&A advisor talk about the transaction. There's a lot of confidentiality in this stuff. And so really, really appreciate both of you coming on the show today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, that's all we have for today's episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Make sure to share this episode with anybody who you might think might benefit from our conversation. If you have a friend that's a business owner, you're a business owner yourself, make sure to check out this episode and get some inspiration from Merry's experience in selling her business and the great work that she did and the great work that Sharon and her team did to make this happen. Make sure to subscribe, like, share, and comment on this episode, and tune in every week, every Thursday morning for a brand new episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast. Until next time, everybody, take care. Thank you for joining us on this episode of the M&A Mastermind Podcast, and a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Cornerstone International Alliance. If you enjoyed today's discussion, don't forget to like, share, and comment. We'd love to hear your thoughts. Make sure you hit that subscribe button so you never miss an episode. We'll be back next week with more insights, strategies, and real-life experiences to help you take your M&A game to the next level.